Solo Leveling by Gong. Chapter 64 Part 1. The Monarchs' Pincer Attack. Whether it be New York, London, Shanghai, or Paris, this was the day metropolises around the world came to a halt. People stopped in their tracks, unable to take their eyes off screens broadcasting breaking news about the disaster happening in Seoul, the capital city of Korea. It was already on people's radar, due to the appearance of the massive gate, so word of the attack quickly spread. Networks in different countries interrupted their regularly scheduled programming to broadcast the live stream. Viewers were aghast at the aerial footage of the blood-drenched streets of Seoul. If a bustling metropolitan city like Seoul was in such a state, there was no hope for the rest of them. The tragedy felt way too close to home. That was most likely why Thomas Andre's appearance had been so reassuring. Excited foreign correspondents, who were busy filming, chanted the American hunter's name as loud as possible. Viewers put their hands together and cheered for Thomas as one. People on the streets rooted for him, as he'd seemed to gain the upper hand. Harder! Yeah! Get him! Destroy him! Destroy the bastard Goliath! Let's go! But silence fell when Goliath's fist was crushed, his arm snapped, and his blood and his flesh splattered against the ground. Hands that were raised victoriously toward the sky fell limp. Some shed silent tears as they watched the greatest warrior in history being overwhelmed. It was as if time had ceased. Stunned, everyone seemed to have collectively stopped breathing. They prayed to wake up from this nightmare. But Thomas's agonized screams continued through the speakers. Their faces fell in despair. Just when all hope seemed lost, a hunter with European features suddenly barreled toward the beast and knocked him back. And he wasn't the only one to pop up out of nowhere. A hunter with black hair appeared out of thin air next to him. Viewers and reporters alike had no idea what was going on. What had just happened? Who were those two people? Because of the speed and distance at which it had occurred, the cameras couldn't capture the mystery hunters' faces. But the black soldiers filling the street were unmistakable. It's Hunter Jin Woo-sung. Hunter Sung has appeared. No need to see his face. No need to confirm his name, either. We know exactly who that is. Those black soldiers. That's Hunter Jin Woo-sung without a doubt. Goliath has fallen, but Hunter Jin Woo-sung has taken over. Hunter Sung's minions have surrounded the monsters. Yeah. As the soldiers in black crowded the streets of Seoul, viewers around the world threw their hands in the air with joy. Having already lost one national-level hunter, Americans had been the most devastated at Thomas's defeat, so they were more exhilarated than anyone. Their cheers were loud enough to shake the country. The video of Jin Woo on the Jeju Island raid had gotten more than 2 billion views, so there wasn't a soul who didn't know who he was. The whole world chanted Jin Woo's name. Hey, I know that other guy. I know exactly who he is. It's Leonard Nairman from Germany. But even the person trying to show off his knowledge quickly joined in on chanting Jin Woo's name. The entire world was focused on Jin Woo-sung. Jin Woo's shadow army encircled him, and the three monarchs. Here, on the street cloaked in shadow by Monarch's domain, the army's morale was at an all-time high. Jin Woo inspected each monarch's reaction in turn. They looked amused. The female giant made of insects scanned the street and snickered. So this is the new shadow army? They are large in number, but they're a disorganized mess. The Frost monarch sniffed and stepped forward. He took a deep breath and blew a bone-chilling wind throughout the area. Creak. In an instant, everything above ground froze, including the shadow army. No way. Jin Woo could only stare, astonished. The monarchs were able to neutralize Jin Woo's soldiers in the blink of an eye. Jin Woo had experienced this once before when he had fought Balan, the demon monarch of White Lightning, in the Demon's Castle Instance dungeon. However, he had faced only one enemy back then. This time, he was facing 3 simultaneously. Jin Woo tried in vain to free his soldiers from the ice by summoning them. "Your soldiers cannot make a single move inside the prison I've created." Having imprisoned the Shadow Army, the Frost Monarch seemed confident of their victory. However, the setback hadn't abated Jin Woo's rage. "You?" He pointed the blade of Kamish's wrath in his right hand at the Frost Monarch. "You, if no one else, will die today." The combat power of the Shadow Army was but a useful tool to Jin Woo. It was unfortunate that Jin Woo was unable to utilize them, but that didn't mean he had any intention of letting the Frost Monarch leave with his life. He had a score to settle with the asshole. The Frost Monarch grimaced, as if the shoulder wound Jin Woo had previously inflicted was aching. "You worm!" He swept his hands up, and golems rose from the ice covering the ground. At the same time, the Queen of Insects whistled, and the corpses strewn throughout the area began to wriggle around. Crack, creak, crack. The corpses twisted and turned, rearranging their bones and joints until they transformed into 4-legged creatures that crawled like spiders. Are they undead creatures? No, they weren't undead. The remains were being controlled by strange parasites that had entered their brains. Detecting the magic power of the insects moving within the corpses' skulls, Jin Woo turned to the Queen of Insects. "Did you think that we killed these humans for no reason?" The queen had planted the egg of a special parasite in each human the beast had killed. Golems and parasites. Realizing he would be unable to convert his enemy's armies into shadow soldiers, it dawned on him how extensive the monarch's preparations had been. Phew! He took a deep breath. As the golems and the corpses made their way past the frozen soldiers and toward Jin Woo, the hunter focused on his heartbeat. Ba-dump, be-a-dump, be-a-dump. He had endured countless dangers to come this far. He closed his eyes. Jin Woo's extremely keen perception picked up on every single movement from the enemy, however small. He could do this, just as he'd done countless times before. Here they come. When Jin Woo opened his eyes, the human spiders were upon him. Time slowed down as the Kamish Wrath daggers slashed through the air. SHK, 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 SHK. The human spiders that had leaped at him were sliced in half in midair. Whack! Jin Woo kicked away a golem trying to punch him, jumped into the air, and searched for his primary target, the Frost Monarch. The annoyed monarch was pointing at Jin Woo and screeching at the golems, but the slow hunks of ice were no match for Jin Woo's speed. Jin Woo used ruler's authority to hurl his own body toward the Frost Monarch, shooting forth as fast as a bullet. The Frost Monarch was startled when Jin Woo appeared right in front of him in the blink of an eye. Jin Woo swung his daggers, aiming for the creature's face with skin as rough as the bark of an old tree. Clang! Before Kamish's wrath could cut anything, something hard intercepted the dagger. The Fong Monarch had blocked the strike with his wrist. "Do you really think this useless piece of metal can so much as scratch me?" The Fong Monarch chortled, revealing his wickedly sharp teeth covered with flesh and blood. But Jin Woo also chuckled. "You dare to laugh at me?" A black aura surrounded Kamish's wrath before the beast could pick up that something was wrong. Shunk! The dagger sliced right through the beast's sturdy wrist. The surprised Fong Monarch narrowly avoided the blade plunging into his chest by bending backward at his waist, but it still left a gash on his chest. Jin Woo sensed power close by and looked up. The Queen of Insects was aiming a punch packed with magic power right at him. Whoosh! Jin Woo landed on the ground and immediately tried to repel the Queen's fist with ruler's authority, but he underestimated her and barely managed to block it. Pow! The queen's fist struck the force field created by ruler's authority, generating a shock wave that swept away the human spiders near them. But more human spiders took their place and skittered after him. Jinwoo stepped on one of their heads and bounded into the air. He gathered his magic power on Kamish's wrath. ZZZZT! The black aura concentrating on the dagger's vibrating blade distorted the space around it. Rhea! With a roar, Jinwoo swung his dagger with all his might. SHHHK, 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 SHHHK. His magic power spread out in dozens of directions and swept away his enemies below. Dragon's Claw. The attack eliminated half of the golems and spiders, but whip! As Jinwoo looked to the side to see a giant palm about to hit him, the shadow of the palm covered his face. Crap. The attack was from an angle he couldn't avoid, so the only thing he could do was put his guard up. The Queen of Insects swatted Jinwoo into the side of a building as if he were a mere bug. Thud. The impact was so great, the buildings across the street shook as well. Jinwoo made his way out of the debris, but he fell to the ground, breathing heavily. Gah! He felt dizzy, and his ears were ringing. His vision got a bit blurry, but he didn't have time to catch his breath. When he looked up, he saw several thousand ice arrows trained on him floating over his head, courtesy of the Frost Monarch. Jinwoo got up and held his breath as he deflected the ice arrows raining over him. He moved so fast, he looked like a blur. But how long can he withstand our pincer attacks? The Frost Monarch smiled wickedly while continuing to summon arrows. He was waiting for when Jinwoo inevitably slowed down. Shunk! The Frost Monarch stared uncomprehendingly at the dagger suddenly sticking out of his chest. His own blood was smudged on his hand. When he looked up, the insolent human was staring at him. Jinwoo had managed to throw one of his daggers even as he deflected arrows. The Frost Monarch's blood boiled. How dare a miserable human harm me, a monarch? SHHHK. Jinwoo quickly summoned back the dagger from the monarch's chest. It had pierced his heart. It would have been a fatal injury for an ordinary human, but the monarch barely seemed to register it. At least the rain of arrows had stopped. Jinwoo growled as he held up Kamish's wrath. Like I said, you're going to die today. Grah! The golems controlled by the outraged Frost Monarch, the human spiders manipulated by the Plague Monarch, and the Fong Monarch whose arm had fully regenerated and now was armed with a sword he'd pulled out from a pocket dimension similar to Jinwoo's inventory. Jinwoo was able to track all their movements as they resumed their attacks. He gripped the two Kamish's wrath daggers in hand, taking deep breaths. Krieg. Just then, a loud crack sounded over his shoulder, accompanied by a voice he was ecstatic to hear. My king! A few minutes ago, as one of Jinwoo's most loyal subjects, he felt utterly helpless while held captive in the Frost Monarch's ice prison. Was he truly this weak? What had he continuously leveled up for? Baru was miserable that there was nothing he could do as his king was surrounded by the enemy right in front of him. But he couldn't do anything about it. The Frost Monarch's existence was on a different plane than his, and Baru had no counter for his magic spell. All he could do was pray that his king would make it out safe. Fortunately, Jinwoo seemed to be holding his own against his mystical enemies. My king is as phenomenal as I expected. This lowly servant is once again in awe. Baru was so moved by his master's display that it brought him to tears. However, being outnumbered was starting to weigh heavily on Jinwoo. Baru struggled to break free as he watched the opposition corner Jin Wu. "My king! My king!" Seeing the plague monarch send Jin Wu crashing into a building was the last straw. His king was in danger. His king was in danger. His king was in danger. Baru needed to protect his king. Snap! Baru lost his mind. He went into emergency mode, losing all rationality and operating solely on the instinct to protect his king. "Screa!" Baru roared, his face grotesquely distorted. His arms, shoulders, neck, chest, thighs, calves, and ankles. Every part of Baru's body expanded at once, pushing at the block of ice that was imprisoning him. Crick, creak. Hairpin cracks started to form in the seemingly impenetrable cage. Baru thrashed his whole body. Creak. Unable to withstand the insanely agitated ant soldier, the surface of the ice prison began to give. The only thought in Baru's head was to save his king. Scra! Twisting his body with all his might, Baru finally broke through the ice. Krakum! Baru ripped wide an opening with his bare hands and flew straight toward Jin Wu. "My king!" Baru! Although his master welcomed him, Baru didn't have time to be happy. Instead, he noticed the small scratches and cuts on his master that had come from the insect woman swatting him into the building earlier. How dare that insect woman lay a hand on Jin Wu? How dare she touch his king? Screawea! Incensed, Baru shot toward the queen of insects. The frost monarch was thunderstruck as Baru's cry rang through the downtown area of Seoul. "A mere shadow soldier broke free of my binding spell?" That should have been impossible. The frost monarch inspected Baru's power level and couldn't help but gasp. It was not a mere shadow soldier. How did that human give rise to a marshal? Marshals acted as extensions of the shadow monarch, and each one was an incarnation of destruction. While the frost monarch was taken aback at this news, the queen of insects advanced. "This impertinent child doesn't even recognize who his mother is. He must be punished." "Scra! You crazy hag! What did you call me?" The plague monarch, the master of all bugs in the world of chaos, was angered by the ant king's insolence. Whoosh! Baru dodged her and aimed a roar of magic power at her midsection, where bugs were swarming. Grah! The ant king screech tore away the bugs, revealing the true form of the plague monarch for a moment. A woman with rotting flesh and hollow eye sockets filled with maggots. The plague monarch was enraged by the ant king defying his one true master. Guy! The queen of insects retaliated with her own roar that ripped through the air and pushed Baru backward. The ant king eventually regained his balance after skidding back a distance. Scree! Gaw! Out of breath, Baru shook his head to clear it. The queen of insects summoned back the insects to reform her giant body. Okay. Jin Wu observed their fight and nodded. The enemies were too strong, so Baru wouldn't last long. However, he could keep at least one of them preoccupied. The other monarchs were also watching Baru fight the queen. Jin Wu detected how alarmed they were. Baru could only buy him so much time, so Jin Wu bolted toward the frost monarch at full speed, faster than anyone expected. Zoom! With each step, the asphalt split under his foot. The frost monarch generated an ice spear as he kept an eye on Jin Wu charging fiercely toward him. But then, Jin Wu abruptly changed direction just before he reached the frost monarch and leaped at the Fong monarch. The Fong monarch had been planning a counterattack for when Jin Wu attacked the frost monarch, so he flinched at the sudden change in course. He barely blocked Jin Wu's dagger, his animalistic reflexes kicking in. Jin Wu sucked his teeth in disappointment. TSK. He'd hoped to deliver a fatal blow to the Fong monarch with a surprise attack. But the Fong monarch had reacted a little quicker than Jinwu was anticipating. Fortunately, it wasn't a total loss. After all, he'd managed to startle the Fong monarch. Let's keep pushing. He spun Kamish Wrath into a reverse grip and unleashed a continuous attack. The sound of the sharp blades ripping through the air echoed, leaving cuts on everything around them. Clank, clang, clank, clang, clank, clank. The king of beasts struggled to keep up, grimacing as he was forced back. Suddenly sensing hostility behind him, Jinwu quickly twisted his torso, and the Frost Monarch narrowly missed Jinwu's midsection with his ice spear. It was now 2 against 1. For a split second, Jinwu made eye contact with the Frost Monarch and picked up on his animosity. Jinwu audibly gritted his teeth together as he struck the ice spear with one dagger. The impact on the spear caused the Frost Monarch to double over. Jinwu quickly took advantage of that. SHHHK. Jinwu aimed for the monarch's arrogant eyes, but he was only able to deliver a shallow wound in that area of his face when the Frost Monarch quickly turned his head to avoid it. So close. Jinwu anticipated an attack from the King of Beasts next and whirled around. Clang. It was a close call, but Jinwu didn't even have time to be relieved. The Frost Monarch gripped his spear tightly and resumed his attacks. The Frost Monarch in front of him, the Fong Monarch behind him. The two overpowered monsters swung at him relentlessly. Clang, 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 clang. Kamish Wrath whipped around at lightning speed, blocking and repelling their strikes. Jinwu and the monarchs were moving so quickly that humans could see only a blurry string of afterimages. In fact, it was impossible for Jinwu himself to physically see the monarchs' movements. Instead, Jinwu was able to read the flow of the attacks. Their actions, line of sight, breathing muscles, the movement of magic power. With his outstanding perception, he didn't miss a thing. I can see it all. If Jinwu moved a little faster, he could surpass his enemies. Just a little faster. Faster, faster, faster. The monarchs were flabbergasted as Jinwu's speed continued to increase. How is that possible? He shouldn't be able to use the full power of the Shadow Monarch yet, but he's still. Their opponent was evolving past his species' limitations right before their eyes. The two monarchs couldn't help but recall their fear of one of the most powerful kings in the world of chaos. Bam! With his daggers crossed, Jinwu blocked the two monarchs' weapons and sent them hurtling backward. The two monarchs couldn't hide their astonishment. Leonard was sure that he was the only one here able to follow the fight with his own eyes, as Thomas was currently surrounded by healers tending to his serious wounds. But he was unable to make things out clearly. He was amazed. Despite facing off against the beast that had subdued a national-level tank and the monster who had frozen the entire area with a single breath, Jinwu never relented. Soon, Hunter Sung sped up, moving too fast for the naked eye. It was like a tornado was hitting the area, complete with loud explosions of sound. What? Thomas couldn't help asking at the sudden loud noises. What's going on? Leonard couldn't take his eyes off Jinwu and answered incredulously. It's like... Was this what it looked like when beings capable of destroying the planet battled it out? It's like I'm watching the end of the world. Leonard shook his head as he answered honestly. The one comforting thing was that at least one of the fighters was on their side. Scraw! Jinwu turned at Baru's scream. The Queen of Insects had trapped Baru under her foot, and no amount of struggling could break him free. Jinwu's eyes widened as he felt magic power leaving Baru's body, the ant soldier's very existence fading. Is this how they got rid of the soldier attached to Thomas? Jin Woo first repelled the attacks of the two remaining monarchs, and then called Baru back into his shadow. You cannot call back the designated target. You cannot call back the designated target. The system repeated the message like a parrot. Jin Woo's expression grew dark. He couldn't lose Baru this way. Baru was a valued soldier, and the best weapon in his shadow army arsenal. Without Baru, the precarious balance of power will shift. The result of the fight would be decided. Jin Woo shook off the spear and the sword coming at him, and charged at the queen. She was preoccupied with sending the shadow soldier back to the void, so she belatedly noticed his approach. Human! Jin Woo expelled magic power from his throat just like Baru had done earlier. Rhea! The bugs covering the queen fell off by his magically charged roar. Her true form revealed, the queen could not hide her alarm. She quickly spat green goo at Jin Woo's face, which he easily blocked using ruler's authority. The leftover poisonous fumes were cleared away by a passive skill. The remnants of skill. Deadly poison have been detected in the air. Buff, detoxing has been activated. 3, 2, 1. Detoxing is complete. Not only was the Plague Monarch not a threat to Jin Woo, but she was also within his reach now. Jin Woo's eyes gleamed. The Frost Monarch survived a stab to the heart earlier. It was highly likely that the Plague Monarch would as well. Jin Woo would have to attack until he found a weak spot. He gripped his daggers tightly. Mutilation. SHHHK, 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 SHHHK. Jin Woo's daggers dotted the queen's body with holes, like a Gatling gun, ripping her to shreds. Arg! But the maggots inside her twisted and bound together to instantly regenerate her body. Regeneration? Not a problem. If the queen had the ability to regenerate, Jin Woo simply needed to pour on the attack and push things beyond her healing abilities. He followed her as she was knocked back, continually using the mutilation skill. SHHHK, 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 SHHHK. Surrounded by a black aura, Kamish wrath bit into her non-stop. Ah! Jin Woo stripped the queen of insects of every inch of flesh by relentlessly using mutilation until finally, you have defeated one of the 9 monarchs, Quresha the Plague Monarch. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. A medley of messages popped up. Nice. But he didn't have time to enjoy the victory because there were still 2 more enemies who wanted his neck. Jin Woo hurriedly spun to defend against the murderous energy coming for him, but the opponents were a little faster than he was this time. While he had been preoccupied with the Plague Monarch, the enemy reached for him with one hand. Jin Woo felt 5 wisps of wind at his back. Shunk! 5 claws burst out of his chest. The Fang Monarch had now fully transformed into a werewolf and dug his claws in the dead center of Jin Woo's back, penetrating critical areas. Jin Woo's body froze. Clink. Clang. Kamish wrath fell from his hands. The Frost Monarch stood in front of him. The monarch formed an ice dagger in his hand. This is the end. He thrust it into Jin Woo's stomach. Shunk! Having regained consciousness, Baru screamed, Am my king? Jin Woo shook his head at Baru as the ant soldier attempted to stand on shaky legs, but Baru disregarded the order, extending his claws and limping toward the Frost Monarch. Scree! Baru's sorrow and despair flowed into Jin Woo. The hunter didn't want Baru to be sent back to the void by the hands of the monarchs. Realizing what Jinwu was about to do, the Ant King shook his head as tears welled up in his eyes. Despite the Ant King's protests, Jinwu forced Baru back into his shadow. The ancient ice elf grinned, sure that victory was at hand. "Is that all you've got, human?" He put his mouth close to Jinwu's ear and whispered, "Then I suppose you won't live to see the day our armies descend on this plain, nor the mountains of human corpses and rivers of blood they will leave in their wake." The Frost Monarch moved back and snickered. "However, your homeland will suffer a different fate. I shall personally torture the people of this nation simply because they come from the same wretched place as you do. They will be made to live the rest of eternity in a state between life and death." The cold emanating from the dagger piercing Jinwu's stomach spread throughout his whole body, freezing him. Even as his face frosted over, Jinwu's eyes blazed with anger. The Frost Monarch laughed at him. "Continue to hate me even in death, for that will also bring me great pleasure." The king of the snow folk pulled the dagger out from Jinwu's stomach and stabbed it into Jinwu's heart. The dagger shone with a cold white light as it crushed through Jinwu's rib cage and burrowed into his heart. Shunk! Once the Frost Monarch was sure the hunter's heart had been destroyed, he pulled out his dagger. Jinwu helplessly fell to the ground and hit his head on the asphalt. He felt dizzy, but he could still sense his enemies getting farther and farther away from him. "No, I can still." He tried to move his body, but he didn't have the energy to bend a finger. He quickly lost his senses and consciousness. Soon, he was floating in darkness as his human heart stopped. Notifications began popping up one by one. The player's HP is now 0. The player has died. The player possesses the Black Heart. All the requirements for passive skill, unknown, have been met. Passive skill, unknown, has been activated. The skill information window opened unprompted. The list of passive skills blinked and updated. Skills: passive skill, unknown, LV, max, willpower LV .1, dagger master LV, max. SHF. Passive skill, evolution LV, max, willpower LV .1, dagger master LV, max.